My gamertag is Patrick_Stewart69. For 20 years I've been playing Elder Scrolls on console. I have witnessed terrors beyond comprehension. I've heard strange sounds in my dreams. I fear that these are the final hours of my Xbox.
But you can't do this to me. You know how much I sacrificed?
In order to reach a compromise, oftentimes we must sacrifice something. And we sacrifice with the hope that whatever we gain will be greater than what we lost. These two words best describe Elder Scrolls games on console. The fact that Bethesda were able to fit some of the most ambitious games of their time into the dead ringer for the red ringer is nothing short of a miracle, and I will be forever grateful that a series of games that were once only on PC could be played in the family living room, so my literal baby brain could watch my older brothers run around on these weird-looking flea things and swing a sword that I really thought was a banana, only to then watch my brothers years later duplicating sigil stones and brick our Xbox 360. These are core memories that I will always cherish as much as any childhood memory. Like, I don't know, learning to ride a bike, I guess. But my bike couldn't cast flare, so suck it, Schwinn. But I have already sacrificed something for this very video. There's actually one more word that describes playing Elder Scrolls games on consoles that I haven't mentioned yet. One teeny tiny flaw that feasts on my nostalgia like a parasite. A word that summarizes how it feels to go back and play these games on console today. The inconvenient truth is that Elder Scrolls and consoles have a complicated history. A history marred by NPC crashouts and actual crashes.
Stop!
So step into the gates of madness with me and see just how bad things can get. You may lose a piece of yourself along the way, as that fondness for your first playthrough way back when may soon have its own spot that can't be erased. But that is just a sacrifice you'll have to make. And do keep in mind, the problems and bugs with these console ports are a lot like real-life problems. Just because you had no problems doesn't mean someone else didn't. Let's start with the biggest Elder Scrolls game of all time. Yeah, I think I watched this on my PS5. When looking at Skyrim's history with consoles, the toughest question to answer is, which one? Besides the fridge version, which was pretty cool, there's one port that still lives in infamy. The launch version on PlayStation 3. Longtime viewers of the channel know this is not the first time I've talked about the problems with PS3, and you might think I'm beating a dead horse, and you're probably right, but I can't hear you over the sounds of the whinnying. November 11th, 2011. Skyrim just released. The first players on PlayStation 3 excitedly rushed to start the game and get their heads chopped off. Hours and soon days of playtime later, and PS3 players began to live the simple life after much adventuring. They found a wife and home, became leaders of a dominatrix death cult. Everything was perfect. But soon, some weird things started happening. Honey, what's wrong with this bowl? Honey?
How can I serve you? How can I serve? How can I serve?
Cheese.
Cheese? I don't have cheese. Okay, I guess I do. I can't do this. I'm leaving. Peine forte et dure is a torture method that has its victims placed under a heavy weight. Over time, more and more weight would be placed on top of the victim until they eventually suffocated or were crushed. The real pain comes not from an instantaneous death, but slowly bearing the weight of your burdens.
I am sworn to carry your burden.
This is basically what happens to Skyrim on the PS3. It turns out that Skyrim on the PlayStation 3, like other Bethesda published games, would run worse the bigger your save file gets, meaning the more you play, the more you pay. Essentially because of how large a game Skyrim is and the fact that virtually every object, NPC, and environment has its own location and physics, as well as any changes you make to the game world too. And the game has to track all of that every single time you load in. It's fitting that Skyrim runs on the creation engine, because the game engine functions like an actual god. You might think that no one saw you throw that basket over the shopkeeper to rob him blind. But God did. Combine that with the PlayStation 3's already divided memory pool, and you get something the community called save bloating. mere days after its release, and there's reports of massive lag problems. Skyrim said frames? Yeah, I think we got some in the back, let me check. The differences between a new and old save bloated file were drastic. Play enough Skyrim, and save bloating could make the entire game borderline unplayable. Eurogamer tested a 65-hour playtime character on PlayStation 3, and reported frame rates as low as 0 in some locations. I mean, at that point, let's just drop this part, because that's just frame. But it wasn't just affecting the frames.
But the women and the children.
There's reports on Bethesda's own forums of severe social anxiety from NPCs. Players would try to finish the quests, but couldn't because save bloating had caused NPC dialogue to straight up disappear.
Please talk to me, please!
You could steal an item, or punch Nazim, and the cops wouldn't arrest you because the game couldn't bring up the "you're under arrest" dialogue tree, so the cops would just do nothing about the crime. Good to see some realism in my video game. Walk into Whiterun, and there's a chance that the textures just wouldn't load. There would also be crashes, and freezes.
Nope.
And some freezes.
Nope.
Even more freezes.
Nope.
Jesus Christ, maybe this is the fridge port. It was soon discovered that if your save file exceeded 5 megabytes, your game would go the way of Sonic fan art and begin bloating. This problem was like a benign tumor hidden in the PS3 version, where even if you didn't experience any problems at the start, eventually you will when that tumor turns malignant. About a week after Skyrim's launch, IGN polled over 25,000 PlayStation 3 players to get to the bottom of this.
Let us know how big your save file is. Are you having any problems? How far in the game are you? Even, maybe what class you're playing as. We don't really know what the problem is. Some people have some funny...
They found that the overwhelming majority of the players had save files over the dreaded 5 megabyte line, which of course meant around 75% of those in the poll experienced at least one of the problems from save bloating.
That's bad.
Bethesda was closely monitoring the PS3 situation, and things were not good. Fans were literally begging Bethesda by spamming their email to fix the PlayStation 3 port, so Bethesda got to work. I'm excited to announce patch 1.1. Didn't fix the PS3 problem. Patch 1.2. Yeah, still didn't work. Patch 1.3. Yeah, you know what's going on. This led to my favorite part of researching any Bethesda game release, the adjustment arms race, which is when the internet rushes to brainstorm any sort of makeshift fixes. If Bethesda couldn't fix this, then the community would do it themselves.
One thing you can do to try and help it, you can switch off a lot of these autosave.
Okay, turn off autosaves.
Ah, god damn it!
These are some simple solutions you can do to fix the issue. Messages and set them to do not display.
Got it. Okay, wait, actually, just have your character sleep and stay inside for a month. I thought this game was supposed to be an escape from the real world, but okay. Wait, actually, just say no to quests. Dare style, baby. Even Bethesda joined the arms race by offering their own over-the-counter fixes, like try updating to the latest patch, or just rebuild your entire PlayStation 3's database, which could nuke some of your other files, by the way. All of these arbitrary fixes. If only there was one permanent solution.
Gigabyte of RAM should do the trick.
Ah yes, thank you. But for many PlayStation 3 players, the lag was still there, finally prompting Bethesda to announce patch 1.4, which for most players, banished the bloating once and for all. But to fix this, there was sacrifice. Not everyone's characters could survive till the patch. Looking at old gaming forums from 2011 is like reading a bunch of widowers mourning the loss of their level 38 Argonian stealth archer because their save files got too big and were sent back to Oblivion. Skyrim often gets a ton of flack for being re-released and ported to anything with an on button.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
However, it's actually our old pal Oblivion that started this trend for Bethesda. Oblivion on Xbox 360, Oblivion on PS3, Oblivion spin-off movie with Tom Cruise, and even a grime song. They marketed this game into hell, and unsurprisingly, the PS3 version also had a lot of the same issues as Skyrim. But poor Winston here is looking pretty tired. No, for Oblivion, we're gonna dig a little deeper. In its time, many older Elder Scrolls fans criticized Oblivion for holding the player's hand too much. So what if you could hold the game in your hand? Behold! Oblivion on PSP. No, seriously. Alongside the release of Oblivion in 2006, Bethesda had planned a spin-off game on the PSP called The Elder Scrolls Travels: Oblivion Revelations Game of the Year Edition You Will Die. The mere idea of this is a prospect so preposterous that PlayStation Magazine even asked Bethesda how they planned to fit the entire Oblivion experience on a handheld console.
Well now.
And Todd Howard said, "We don't." And as funny as that is, it actually makes sense to say, because consider the following fact. This was in 2006. We're still years away from the Steam Deck or even the Soulja handheld. The ability to play a full port of Oblivion on the go was basically impossible. Which is why Oblivion on the PSP wasn't going to be a sprawling open world game. This was going to be more of a dungeon crawler hack and slash type game, with inspiration from Metroid Prime according to the developers. So think of this game as less engaging, rich storylines and more of this. And before I show you what Oblivion on a PSP looks like, I'll tell you what my teachers told me when applying for colleges. Lower your expectations. Don't expect HD Patrick Stewart on a handheld console from 20 years ago. What you're looking at is actual gameplay from the early builds of the game. And to be honest,
It's not that bad.
the developers pulled off some magic while sacrificing much from the original game to get Oblivion on a handheld. And yet, it still looks comparable to the Oblivion experience. Like the original Oblivion, you start off in a prison cell again. Shout out to the Prison Simulator Portable for keeping thematic continuity. You beat the shit out of some enemies and even go into an Oblivion gate. The only real criticisms is that due to the technical compromises to get it working, the iconic voice acting is replaced with some sensual moaning. The Dramoras are missing there, and instead kind of sound like the C-3PO death sound from LEGO Star Wars. And when you hit a skeleton, it bleeds. As far as the general public was concerned, things were smooth sailing with Oblivion on PSP. Gaming outlets were talking about it, pre-orders even went up. So why am I talking about this? Such a potentially average game, shot down in the prime of its life. Bethesda, what happened? I want to play Oblivion on the bus, come on.
Give me that.
The sad reality is that we have no official answer as to why this game was canceled. Bethesda and the studio they hired to make this port, Climax Studios, have made no statement as to why it was canceled. And yes, the irony of a studio called Climax not being able to finish is not lost on me. Some speculate that the game was too expensive, or had a pretty tight development window, or just wouldn't sell well, or that Patrick Stewart only wanted to be portrayed in HD, or that the entire engine switched mid-development. But my personal theory is that this game suffers from a chronic case of we got Oblivion at home. It may not have been a buggy mess like Skyrim on the PS3 or our best game for last, but that gnawing feeling of never knowing what could have been can sting just as bad. 1 second, I'm getting a phone call. Yep, this is real. Alongside Oblivion on console and Oblivion on PSP, we also got Oblivion for the phone by Virtual Studios. It's hard to articulate my thoughts about this game. I guess it's like if someone took your favorite meal, blended it down to a paste, and then made you sip it through a straw. I just...
Look how they massacred my boy.
Putting Oblivion on a PSP was some magic, then putting it on a phone was an evil and cursed dark art. Because this isn't Oblivion. However, The Elder Scrolls was a pretty big IP by the mid-2000s, so major brands like Verizon were willing to slap their names next to this.
Can you hear me now?
You sleep rather soundly for a murderer. That's good.
And interestingly, the game is not a spin-off story, but a complete retelling of Oblivion's main quest on a LG VX8000. This surely must be the portable Oblivion experience that the PSP failed to deliver, because the marketing materials promised over 10 monsters, including the fan favorite Warrior. Virtual Studios president even said that the game will be a challenging and fast-paced action-oriented game that captures the sense of the Elder Scrolls universe. IGN even gave it an 8 out of 10. Maybe this game could be worth playing.
You serious? The terrible Oblivion utter abominations.
There comes a point where you sacrifice so much from the original vision that you've ostensibly made an entirely different game. And Phone Oblivion is that point. For example, in the phone version, instead of having an assassin, assassinate the Emperor, old Uriel rolls up, throws some pocket sand, and explodes. The final battle just hard cuts to a text crawl saying, "You win, this story is happy end, thank you." Keep in mind too that this footage is from an emulator. On its native hardware, there's no WASD movement or control sticks. In order to move, you have to constantly spam the buttons on your LG VX 8000, which controls about as well as you'd expect.
Okay, to walk in this game, I have to, No.
Meaning the true final boss of Phone Oblivion is not an immortal deity, but carpal tunnel. Really what's propping this up is the sheer novelty of Oblivion on a phone. The only thing in common with the real Oblivion is that your ringtone for your old-ass phone is probably what the NPC's internal monologues sound like. I can't do this. This has to be one of the worst Elder Scrolls experiences I've ever seen.
This is the end. The bitter, bitter end.
We've reached the final stop on our journey, the culmination of every problem we've discussed thus far in one single port, the bloating of Skyrim, the corner's cut of Oblivion. Welcome to Morrowind on the original Xbox. May 2001, Bethesda announces a rather outside-the-box idea. An idea so outside the box that they're going to put Morrowind back in the box. Xbox. For the very first time, an Elder Scrolls game would be released on PC and a home console. Bethesda was feeling optimistic about this decision. A new Elder Scrolls game on a brand new platform during its peak popularity. It could bring in new fans to the franchise, both young and elder. Scrolls. Todd Howard himself said, "Finally, a console that can do Morrowind justice." We call this dramatic irony. A year passes, Morrowind releases. For PC only. Things were not going too well for Morrowind on Xbox, and Bethesda panics. Alright, listen man, just put some duct tape on there and ship it. He's almost broken the locks. The Xbox port is delayed an entire month after the PC release, but it eventually releases, and the Xbox gets to show us its version of Morrowind. What has it been cooking? The load times on the launch version of Morrowind are abysmal. 30-second load screens? Child's play. Try 5 minutes. The first time you booted up Morrowind on Xbox, it would take actual minutes and minutes just to start the game. Why is this taking forever?
This is taking too long. Come on!
Well, the first time you play Morrowind on an Xbox, the entire game's data is transferred onto the Xbox hard drive and stored in something called a cache. But since caches are usually overwritten to improve load times, if you play a different game other than Morrowind, then hop back to Vardenfell, the Xbox would have to repeat the entire process again. So even more of this.
Damn this thing!
And even better, once you do manage to start playing the game, you could randomly face multiple 4 to 5 minute loading screens because the game is not actually loading. Behind the curtains, Bethesda had programmed Morrowind to restart the entire Xbox console during gameplay to clear the RAM and make some space.
My favorite one in Morrowind is you can actually reboot the original Xbox and the user can't tell. You can throw like a screen up. So when Morrowind loads, sometimes you get a very long load. That's us rebooting the Xbox.
Good thing the loading screens go hard because you should definitely be looking at these pretty pictures and do not, I repeat, do not worry about what's going on behind the scenes. Nothing to see here, okay? Just loading. It's chill. In all fairness, this was not a Morrowind exclusive problem. Other game devs use similar techniques to get their games running smoothly, but it still meant loading screens and loading screens and loading screens. Oh, finally. Alright, let's play some. Bethesda must have taken a page out of Mr. Beast's ad read timers because Morrowind's loading screens will tease you. Oh, it's gonna go fast! Oh. You're not gonna sell me Brawl Stars, are you? You know what, you guys have been looking at the same loading screens for a while now. Let's spice things up by having the face textures that are supposed to wrap around the character models glitch onto your screen. Sorry, is that a little too traumatizing? Let me give you the kiddie version.
Go back to the swamp, lizard.
There was also some graphical downgrades on the Xbox version, but graphical fidelity doesn't really matter if the game is good. What does matter is performance. Things like frame rate or draw distance. And on the Xbox, it really put the draw in draw distance. There's so much blank space here I could sketch a Morrowind loading screen. Finding where to go was just a little bit harder on the Xbox version.
Actually, how long is it going to take before Satanin reveals itself? itself. Like my cursor is basically on top of Satanin, and it's still not even in view.
And the low draw distance also made enemy placements harder to anticipate, increasing the likelihood of surprise attacks from. So to hide the low draw distance, Bethesda added fog everywhere, which does feel a lot more atmospheric, so art from adversity, I guess. The frame rate was better than 0 at least. Crashes would happen constantly. Seeing as this was long before the era of detailed bug reports or feedback when a game bricks, the only explanation that your Xbox would give that your game had crashed, if you were lucky, was,
"You gotta clean that disc, bruh."
Fine. And when the game inevitably crashes again,
"You gotta clean that disc."
Okay, fine. Xbox, I've cleaned the disc twice. There's not a single scratch on it. I even put one of those little pine tree air fresheners on it just so it smells nice and clean. Can I please play Morrowind now?
"You gotta..."
Xbox fans were growing so weary of these crashes that Morrowind threads on gaming forums became group therapy. Little did they know, there are certain things worse than a crash.
There's only one absolute. Everything freezes.
At least with a crash, the game shows itself out the door and you have closure. When the game freezes, though, there is ambiguity. Is the game just loading really slowly and I can keep playing, or is this a lost cause? It's that little kernel of hope that twists the knife in your heart. I still remember watching my older brother freeze on a loading screen, and we waited for 10 minutes for something to load in, because we basically had video game Stockholm Syndrome and got so used to these crappy load times that we thought this was genuinely normal gameplay. What about the game-breaking bug that completely despawned an entire room with the NPC you need to beat the main quest? Save bloating? Yep, it's here too. This is just like a badge of honor for Bethesda games, isn't it? Although something funny with Morrowind save bloating is that it would gradually shift every NPC in a static position ever so slightly to the left. Cha-cha sliding NPCs sounds hilarious, and it is, until the guy you need to help fast travel slid to the left one too many times off the dock.
Left foot, 2 stumps.
And now you're out of luck operating this aforementioned flea-looking thing with no license. To its credit, the Xbox version ironed out some of the glitches present in the PC release, but apparently dropped that iron on its foot because somehow the Xbox port introduced its own set of glitches, like accidentally creating immortal NPCs, or an exploit where you could clip through the wall and skip the process of getting your Morrowind citizenship, thereby officially making you an illegal alien. Please don't tell the slop channels about this, they're gonna have a field day. The launch version of Morrowind on Xbox was bad enough that when it released in Europe, some retailers put a pamphlet in the game case detailing the worst game-breaking bugs and how to avoid them. And some of these solutions from the pamphlet and other posts from 2002 are just insane. Make sure to turn down the music slider to increase the frame rate, because if you don't, the Xbox is gonna lag. Make sure to close all doors, because if you don't, the Xbox is gonna lag. Make sure to pull a Walter White and dissolve every corpse you see, because if you don't, the Xbox is gonna lag. Make sure to never hotkey any enchanted weapons on your controller, because if you do, say it with me, the Xbox is gonna lag. Months passed since Morrowind's original release on the Xbox. Some expansions dropped, and a new Game of the Year edition came out, which patched out some of the major issues and created a more stable experience. Mostly. Looking back today, it's quite fascinating hearing about people's experience with Morrowind on the original Xbox. Eerily similar to the factions of Morrowind, a few real-life factions have coalesced within the Elder Scrolls community. Some still prefer to play this version of Morrowind, happily Xing in their box, while others have had some post-Xing clarity. In spite of all its flaws, you have to admit that just getting a game as big as Morrowind to even run on a console back then, that was an accomplishment in and of itself. To make an omelet, you have to break a few eggs, and in order to get these games functional on consoles, sacrifices had to be made. But that isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes there can be beauty in reaching a compromise. Compromise can force you beyond the limit of what you once thought was possible, compel you to experiment with new ideas, or reflect on what needs to improve. And if having to deal with some downgrades meant that millions of people could experience some incredible games and blossom into a vibrant community, then I don't know how you could say we haven't gained more than we lost. Quick lightning round. There was another handheld Elder Scrolls game called The Elder Scrolls Travel's Shadow Key, which looked like this and released on the Nokia N-Gage. And speaking of N-Gage, I got engaged! That's why this video took so long, but I don't really care, I'm getting married. Appreciate you guys.
Tonight's forecast. A freeze is coming.